I just drove a 10-pound sledgehammer through my $12,000 custom office desk. I didn't stop until the expensive mahogany was nothing but splinters and the heavy drawers were crushed. People who know me would say I've finally lost my mind. They'd say the stress of running an HVAC company for 20 years finally snapped my gears. But I'm not crazy. I'm finally awake. I did it because that desk was hiding a secret that turned my whole life into a sick joke. My wife and my best friend were using it to plan my end while I was still sitting in the chair. My name is Jack. I'm 48 years old. I built Miller Heating and Air from one rusted van and a toolbox into a $3 million company. I spent my life in hot attics and freezing crawl spaces. My hands are scarred and my back hurts every morning, but I was proud. I thought I was building a legacy for my wife, Monica, and my business partner, Gary. Gary and I were like brothers. We went to high school together. I gave him half the company because I trusted him. About 6 months ago, things started to get weird. I started feeling tired all the time. My head felt like it was filled with gray smoke. I'd walk into a room and forget why I was there. Monica told me I looked bad. She started making me a special protein shake every morning and giving me vitamins to help my memory. She'd look at me with those pretty blue eyes and tell me everything was going to be okay. Gary started taking over the big meetings. He told me I was slipping. He said the employees were getting worried because I was acting confused. He'd pat me on the back and tell me to go home and rest. He said he'd handle the contracts. I felt like a failure. I actually started to believe I had early onset dementia. I spent nights crying in my office, wondering what would happen to my business when I couldn't remember my own name. Then 3 days ago, I dropped my favorite pen. It rolled under the back of that massive desk. When I reached under there to grab it, I felt something small and plastic. It was a tiny microphone, no bigger than a button, taped to the wood. My heart hit my ribs like a hammer. I'm a simple guy, but I'm not stupid. I knew that mic didn't belong there. I didn't say a word. I went to a local electronics shop and bought a receiver that could pick up the signal. That night, I sat in my truck down the street and listened. What I heard turned my blood to ice. Gary and Monica were in my office. I heard the clink of glasses. They were drinking my expensive bourbon. Then Gary laughed. It was a sound I'll never forget. He told Monica that the lawyer had the papers ready. He said the medical reports he'd paid for were perfect. They were going to prove I was mentally unfit to run the company. Monica's voice was cold and sharp. She asked how much longer they had to wait. She said she was tired of acting like a nurse to a dying old mule. Gary told her that once the judge signed the guardianship papers, they'd sell the company to our biggest rival for $4 million in cash. He said I'd be in a luxury care facility by the end of the month, a place where I'd be so drugged up I wouldn't even know I'd been robbed. My own wife and my best friend were selling my life for a payday. I sat in my truck for 3 hours staring at the dark trees. I wanted to walk in there and show Gary exactly what these scarred hands could do, but I knew better. If I fought them now, they'd use my anger as proof that I was crazy. I needed to be smart. I needed to lead them into a trap they couldn't escape from. That brings us back to the sledgehammer. Monica and Gary came running into the office when they heard the first strike. Monica was screaming. Gary tried to grab my arm. I pushed him back with enough force to send him into the wall. I didn't look at them. I just kept swinging. I told them I heard termites in the wood. I told them the termites were whispering my secrets and I had to kill them. I let a little spit trail down my chin and gave them a wild, vacant look. I saw the look they exchanged. It wasn't fear. It was pure, greedy joy. They thought this was it. They thought the old mule had finally broken for good. They thought they had all the proof they needed to lock me away forever. "It's okay, Jack," Gary said, holding his hands up like he was talking to a scared dog. "The termites are gone now. Why don't you go lie down? Monica and I will handle the mess. We'll call the doctor to help you feel better." I looked at the ruin of the desk, then back at them. I forced a jagged, shaky smile. "Thanks, Gary," I whispered. "I knew I could count on you." I walked out of the room, leaving the wreckage behind. The first move was mine. They think I'm a non-person now. They have no idea I've already turned my entire home into a recording studio, and the sheriff is just waiting for the final act. I woke up the next morning feeling like a ghost in my own house. It wasn't the vitamins or the shakes they were giving me. It was the weight of the big lie. I stayed in bed until I heard the kitchen door open. I made sure my hair was a mess. I made sure my shirt was buttoned wrong. I shuffled into the kitchen, letting my feet drag on the wood floor like I didn't have the strength to lift them. Monica was there. She was humming a song while she made coffee. She looked happy. Why wouldn't she be? She was about to be a very rich widow. She handed me a green protein shake. She told me it would help with the voices I heard yesterday. I took it and gave her a blank, empty stare. I waited until she went into the laundry room to start a load of towels. Then I dumped the whole shake down the sink and rinsed it fast. I filled the glass with a little milk and water so it looked like I'd finished it. I sat on the back porch and stared at the trees. I looked like a man who had given up on life, but inside my mind was racing. At midnight the night before, while they were fast asleep, I had done some real work. I didn't use a sledgehammer this time. I used a small screwdriver and a set of tiny cameras I'd bought at a shop across town. I put one in the smoke detector in the living room. I put another one in the kitchen near the wine rack. I even put one in my own bedroom. Gary showed up around noon. He was wearing an expensive suit that I probably paid for. He didn't look like a guy who worked for a living anymore. He looked like a shark in silk. He sat next to me on the porch and patted my knee. He told me the company was doing great. He said I didn't need to worry about the crews or the big contracts. Then he pulled a thick blue folder out of his leather bag. He told me these were insurance forms. He said if I signed them, the company would pay for my medical care forever. I looked at the papers. I'm not a lawyer, but I've run a business for 20 years. I know how to read a contract. It wasn't about health care. It was a full buyout. It said I was giving up all my shares for $1. $1 for 20 years of my sweat and blood. I picked up the pen. My hand shook like a leaf in a storm. I made a big mess of the signature line. I signed it John Doe in a messy, jagged scrawl. Gary didn't even look at the name. He was too busy looking at my house and my trucks in the driveway. He snatched the paper away and told me I was doing the right thing. He told me I could finally rest and let the experts handle things. That afternoon, I went to my war room. It was just a small tablet I had hidden in the basement behind some old paint cans. I opened the app and watched the live video feed. Monica and Gary were in the living room. They were sitting on my sofa, side by side. They weren't acting like a wife and a business partner. They were acting like high school sweethearts. Gary had his arm around her. He was laughing about how easy it was to trick me. He told her the John Doe signature didn't matter. He said he had a notary friend who would sign anything for $500 and a bottle of scotch. Then Monica said something that made my skin crawl. She told Gary that the slow way was taking too long. She said the digitalis, that's a heart drug, wasn't working fast enough. She wanted to move to a final dose tonight. She said once I was locked in the care facility, people would expect me to die anyway. It wouldn't look strange if my heart just stopped in the middle of the night. I sat there in the dark basement, watching my wife plan my murder on a tiny screen. I realized then that they weren't just after the money. They wanted me gone. My heart was pounding, but not because of a drug. It was the rage of a man who was fighting for his life. Suddenly, I heard the floorboards creak above me. Someone was coming to the basement. I hid the tablet fast behind the paint cans and grabbed a dusty old light bulb from a shelf. I stood there, staring at it like it was a holy relic, when the door opened. It was Monica. She was looking at me with a sharp, suspicious look. She asked what I was doing down here in the dark. I told her I was looking for the sun. I told her the light bulb was the only sun I had left. I made my voice sound small and scared. She let out a long, tired sigh. She told me to come upstairs for dinner. She said she had made my favorite steak and potatoes, and she said she had a special bottle of wine to celebrate my retirement. I followed her up the stairs. I felt like a lamb walking into a slaughterhouse. But this lamb had a secret. I had a recording of every word they'd said, and I was about to change the menu for dinner. The dining room felt like a funeral parlor. Monica had lit candles and put out the good china. The smell of grilled steak filled the air, but to me, it smelled like a trap. I sat at the head of the table, making sure my hands were shaking. Gary was sitting to my right. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket anymore. He looked relaxed, like a man who had already won the lottery. Monica poured the wine. It was a deep, dark red. She set a glass in front of me and told me to drink up. She said it was a special vintage to celebrate new beginnings. I looked at the liquid. I knew it was loaded with enough digitalis to make my heart skip a beat forever. "I'm not thirsty, Monica," I whispered. I kept my eyes on my plate. "The water in the glass looks like it's moving. It looks like little snakes." Gary let out a short, mean laugh. He told me there were no snakes. He told me to stop being a baby and drink my wine so we could enjoy the meal. He was getting impatient. I could see the sweat on his forehead. He wanted this over with. He wanted to go to sleep a millionaire. I picked up the glass. I brought it close to my lips. I could see them both leaning forward. They were holding their breath. Their eyes were wide, watching the wine get closer to my mouth. This was the moment they had been waiting for. Suddenly, I let out a loud, jagged scream. I threw the glass against the wall behind me. The red wine splashed across the white wallpaper like a bloodstain. I stood up and started pointing at the mess. I told them the snakes were trying to jump on me. I started kicking my chair over and shouting about the termites in the floorboards. Monica jumped up, her face twisted in rage. She wasn't acting like a loving wife anymore. She screamed at me to shut up. She told Gary to grab me. Gary stood up and lunged for my arms. I let him catch me. I made myself go limp in his grip. I started sobbing, telling him that the room was getting dark and I couldn't see the exit. "He's totally gone, Gary," Monica hissed. She was wiping wine off her sleeve. "We can't wait for him to drink it, just get the pills. We'll force them down and call the transport crew now. I don't care if it's early." Gary dragged me to the living room and shoved me into my recliner. I didn't fight him. I just sat there, staring at the ceiling, muttering nonsense about the blue lights in the woods. Monica came back with a bottle of white pills. She didn't even try to hide them this time. She told me these were magic beans that would make the snakes go away. That was the close call. My heart was pounding so hard I thought they could see it through my shirt. If they forced those pills down my throat, the game was over for real. I had to move fast, but I had to stay in character. Just as Monica reached for my jaw, I grabbed her wrist. I didn't do it like a crazy man. I did it with the strength of a man who had spent 20 years hauling AC units onto rooftops. I squeezed hard. I heard the bone pop just a little. "Monica," I said. My voice wasn't high or shaky anymore. It was deep, cold, like a winter wind. "I think the beans are a bad idea, don't you?" The look on her face was pure terror. She tried to pull away, but I didn't let go. Gary saw what was happening and started toward me, reaching for a heavy glass lamp on the end table. "Don't do it, Gary," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "Look at the smoke detector." Gary froze. He looked up. He saw the tiny, blinking red light of the high-def camera I had tucked inside the plastic cover. Then I pointed to the one in the corner of the kitchen, and the one in the hallway. "I've got every word, Gary," I said. I stood up, still holding Monica's wrist. "The old Mule and the dying Mule talk, the digitalis plan, the forged signatures, the notary friend. It's all on a secure server at the sheriff's office." The room went dead silent. Monica started shaking. Gary dropped the lamp. It hit the floor and shattered, but nobody cared. They looked like two kids caught with their hands in the cookie jar, except the cookie jar was a murder plot. You're not sick," Monica whispered. Her eyes were darting around the room, looking for a way out. "I was never sick, Monica," I said. "I was just tired, but I'm wide awake now." That's when we heard the sirens. They started low and got louder, echoing through the quiet suburb. Blue and red lights started dancing on the walls of the living room. I let go of Monica's arm. She fell back onto the sofa, sobbing for real this time. Gary tried to run for the back door, but I stepped in his way. I didn't hit him. I didn't have to. The front door burst open, and 3 deputies came in with their guns drawn. But as the handcuffs clicked shut on Gary's wrists, he looked at me and gave a sick, twisted smile. "You think you won, Jack," Gary spat. "Go check your bank account. Go check the payroll. By the time the lawyers are done with you, you won't even own the boots on your feet." I felt a cold shiver go down my back. I knew they had stolen money, but the way Gary was smiling made me realize there was a dark second layer I hadn't found yet. The trap had snapped, but the damage was deeper than I thought. The deputies led Monica and Gary out into the night. Gary was still shouting, his voice echoing off the neighboring houses. Monica was silent, her head down, her expensive silk dress stained with red wine. I stood on the porch and watched the taillights of the police cars fade away. I should have felt happy. I should have felt like the war was over, but Gary's last words were still ringing in my ears. "Go check your bank account." I went back inside. The house was a mess. There was glass everywhere. The smell of the steak dinner was still thick in the air, but now it made me want to throw up. I went to my small laptop in the kitchen. My hands were steady now. I wasn't acting anymore. I logged into the portal for Miller Heating and Air. I checked the main operating account first. My heart stopped. It was zero. I don't mean it was low. I mean there wasn't a single cent left. Every dollar I needed to pay my 30 employees, buy parts, and keep the trucks running was gone. I checked my personal savings. Zero. Then I saw the worst part. There was a new lien on my house. A $500,000 loan had been taken out in my name 2 weeks ago. I felt a cold sweat break out on my neck. I looked at the digital logs to see who had moved the money. I expected to see Gary's name, but it wasn't his login. It was Sarah's. Sarah was my office manager. She had been with me for 15 years. She was the one who sent out the bills and handled the payroll. I had trusted her like a daughter. I realized then that Gary and Monica were just the distraction. While they were busy trying to poison me, Sarah was the one doing the real damage. She was the dark second layer. I didn't wait. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the office. It was 1:00 a.m. The industrial park was dark and quiet, but when I pulled into the lot, I saw Sarah's car. The lights in the front office were on. I walked in without knocking. The sound of the paper shredder was loud in the empty building. Sarah was standing there, feeding stacks of files into the machine. She didn't even look up when I walked in. She just kept shredding. "It's over, Sarah," I said. "The police have Gary and Monica. I know about the money." Sarah stopped the shredder. She turned around and looked at me. She didn't look scared. She looked bored. She told me I was a fool. She said she had been the one running the company for years while I was out playing in attics. She said she deserved the money more than I did. Then she dropped the real bomb. She told me she had spent the last 6 months making a paper trail that made me look like a criminal. She had used my digital signature to buy illegal equipment on the black market. She had made it look like I was stealing from my own employees to pay for a secret gambling problem. She said that even if Gary went to jail for the murder plot, I was going to prison for fraud. "You're the one who's going to take the fall, Jack," she said, leaning against the desk. "I've already sent the files to the IRS. By morning, your name will be mud." I felt the room spin. She had built a trap within a trap. She had used my own confusion and episodes to make it look like I was a desperate man trying to hide my tracks. But then I remembered something. I'm an HVAC guy. I know that if you want to stop a system from blowing up, you need a fail-safe. I walked over to the main server in the corner. I pulled a small USB drive out of my pocket. I told Sarah that I had noticed the money moving 3 months ago. I told her I hadn't been confused at all. I had hired a forensic accountant in secret. Every time she moved money, My accountant was watching. "I let you move the money, Sarah," I said. My voice was cold and hard. "I wanted to see where it went, and I wanted to see who was helping you. I have the recordings of you and Gary talking in this office. I have the proof that you forged those gambling records." Sarah's face went white. The boredom was gone. She lunged for the server, but I stepped in her way. I told her it was too late. I told her the files she sent to the IRS were actually being intercepted by a detective I'd been working with for weeks. Just then the front door of the office opened. It was Hatcher, the sheriff's deputy. He looked at Sarah and the pile of shredded paper. He shook his head and told her she was a terrible liar. As Hatcher led Sarah away, I sat down in my old chair. My business was broke. My house had a huge loan on it. My wife and my best friend were in jail. I had won, but I was sitting in the middle of a ruin. But Hatcher walked back in and put a hand on my shoulder. He told me they had found the offshore account. He said the money hadn't been spent yet. It was sitting in a bank in the Caymans, waiting for the notary to clear it. He said I'd get every cent back. I looked at the empty office. I had my life back. I had my company back. But as I looked at the shredder, I saw one piece of paper that hadn't been destroyed yet. It was a letter from my own brother. The dark second layer had a third floor, and it was even worse. I picked up that last scrap of paper from the shredder. My heart was already heavy, but this was the weight that finally broke me. It was a letter from my younger brother, Danny. He was the one who had introduced me to Monica 3 years ago. I thought he was being a good brother. I thought he wanted me to be happy. But the letter told a different story. Danny owed Gary a lot of money from a bad gambling habit. Gary had promised to wipe the debt if Danny helped him place Monica in my life. My own brother had sold me like a piece of used equipment. He was the one who told them about my routines and my bank passwords. He was the one who told them I was a soft target. I sat in that dark office and cried, not because of the money, not because of the company. I cried because there was no one left in my life I could trust. My wife, my best friend, my office manager, and my brother. They had all lined up to watch me die. The trial happened 6 months later. It was the biggest news our town had seen in years. I sat in the front row every single day. I wore my best suit and kept my back straight. I wanted them to see the man they couldn't break. The recordings from the hidden cameras were the star of the show. The jury sat in total silence as they heard Monica and Gary laughing about the final dose. They heard Sarah talking about making me look like a criminal. When the tapes played, Monica started sobbing, but I didn't see any regret in her eyes. I only saw fear because she knew she had lost. Sarah made a deal with the state. She told the police everything about the money and the fake paper trail in exchange for a shorter sentence. She got 10 years in prison. Gary got 25 years for conspiracy to commit murder and fraud. My brother, Danny, was arrested too. He got 5 years for his part in the theft. Then it was Monica's turn. The judge didn't have any mercy. He called her a predator and said she was a danger to every honest man in the country. He sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As they let her out in handcuffs, she looked at me one last time. She tried to say my name, but I just looked away. She wasn't my wife anymore. She was just a mistake I had finally fixed. It took a long time to get my life back. The money from the Caymans was eventually returned to my accounts. I used it to pay my employees and get the lien off my house. I didn't sell Miller Heating and Air. I kept it, but I moved the office to a new building. I couldn't walk into the old one without smelling the shredder and the lies. I'm 49 now. I live alone in my house, and for the first time in my life I like the silence. I don't drink protein shakes anymore. I make my own coffee and I check the seals myself. I hired a new office manager, a retired lady who just wants a quiet job and has no interest in my bank accounts. I kept a small piece of that mahogany desk I smashed with the sledgehammer. I kept it on the mantel in my living room. People ask me what it is, and I just tell them it's a reminder. It reminds me that a man can build a palace with his hands, but he has to protect it with his mind. The old mule is still standing. I'm still working, still building, and still keeping my eyes wide open. I learned the hard way that blood doesn't always mean family, and a smile can hide a grave. But I also learned that I'm stronger than any drug they could give me. I walked out to my backyard last night and looked at the stars. The air was clean. The shadows didn't look like snakes anymore. They just looked like trees. I took a deep breath and smiled. The fire was out. The rats were gone. And for the first time in 20 years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The game is over. I won. And that's the only thing that matters.